So we are dealing with a suppressed science. If you want a tutorial in this, I would advise you to either get a guy named Joseph Farrell on your show as a guest, Dr. Farrell, or start reading his voluminous books. I mean, Joseph can write like a book a month, and it's got depth and it's got references and it's real science. He's an Oxford PhD. You know, he can run rings around most of the rest of us who take years to write one book. He can write an incredible book in a month and does excellent homework. And so if you want a real tutorial in the history of torsion field physics and how the Nazis were involved and the Soviets were involved and the U.S. government was involved and the so-called Philadelphia experiment seems to be part of the secret field, all of this stuff aggregates down to the same stuff, which is it's suppressed science. It's the way the universe really works. It's what Einstein was looking for through his entire career, the so-called unified field theory. Torsion physics is the unified field, and those buildings came down in New York because somebody, and I can't tell you tonight who, but somebody used it to destroy two 1,500-foot skyscrapers in seconds.
You believe this. You realize that. I know you realize the gravity of what you are saying.
Yeah, I gave a whole presentation in Amsterdam a couple, 3 years ago laying out the point-by-point case building on the work of a brilliant genius named Dr. Judy Woods, who George got on and actually interviewed. And then I was able to get a copy of Dr. Woods' book, which is sitting here on my desk, called Where Did the Towers Go? I was able to get a copy of that book, which is a meticulous second-by-second recounting of all the evidence around 9/11 and the fact that those buildings didn't collapse. They were dematerialized. They were dustified, to use her term.
That's pretty strong stuff, Richard.
It's in the data. I was able to get a copy of Wood's book into the hands of Jesse Ventura. Jesse Ventura went on national radio shows and started talking about Dr. Judy Wood, and then suddenly weird things started happening in Jesse's life, and he shut up. Because it's the touchstone to what really happened on 9/11. Now, you got to open your mind really big and say, if somebody in our reality has that kind of physics and technology and exercise that as a demonstration on 9/11 to the power structure, who did it, why did they do it, and where are they now? And has the entire Al-Qaeda 9/11 post-war on terror really been a two-tier war, where at one level we're fighting with, a bunch of guys that call themselves Al-Qaeda, but at the other level we're secretly fighting the real enemy who has this kinds of technology at their disposal and obviously are not afraid to use them based on this physics.
You know how it is with me, Richard Hoagland. I'm all over the place here, but I'll tell you what. I have to go back and revisit before you talk about these readings. Now, maybe you know what you know. You don't really care what anybody thinks about this, but there's something stuck in my mind like a L. Ron Hubbard engram. And that's that on 9/11, these buildings came down due to torsion field physical external force applied to them. Is that your story and you're sticking with it? Because I saw those planes fly in there. They're supposed to be powdered thermite, all over nanothermite and this and that. And I mean, the information is just so liquid,
John.
Hit me.
The planes were real. The planes hit the building. The planes did not bring the buildings down.
Okay.
You have to separate two separate events. The planes were the excuse to cover the real physics. Remember, this is the physics that is not supposed to be known or addressed or acknowledged by the mainstream scientific community. If you're sending a message to the high levels of the U.S. government, a threat of unimaginable proportions,
yes,
do it in a way that nobody outside that very small circle understands the real message. But it's unmistakable to them. And what has happened in the wake of 9/11? You said it in your opening with your first guest. We have lost rights left and right. We haven't seen this savaging of the Constitution since Lincoln, since
it's true.
the war between the states, since the huge, cataclysm that sundered and almost broke this fledgling nation, brother against brother, million-plus dead on both sides.
Yes.
We haven't seen this level of savaging the Founding Fathers' creation since the 1800s. What I have been asking for the last 10 years, since 2001, which was supposed to be so incredible, a la my friend Arthur Clarke and Stanley Kubrick, and that film and those projections, and look what it turned into. Look at the pile of ashes we've been left with. Essentially, endless war, Orwell, up to your ears and as far as the eye can see. Think about the huge hidden dynamic behind the scenes that can cause a global warping of history on this scale.
Yes.
And you're telling me that a handful of guys wearing turbans with C4 are able to do that to the assemblage of the greatest nations this planet has ever seen? No, there's something so much bigger that they're keeping secret, and those buildings came down, and again I go back to what you can trust, which is the physics. Read Dr. Woods' book. Read the mountain of evidence of material science and actual forensic reconstruction of what happened to the metals and the concrete and the glass and the heatless fires and the embers that smoked for weeks and weeks and weeks with no real heat, and the fact that certain materials were completely disintegrated. And I will tell you tonight, without fear of contradiction, if somebody wants to debate me one-on-one on this, the materials that vanished first were the torsion active materials, the materials that amplify and send beams of torsion field physics into matter and wind up deconstructing it at the etheric level. We're talking the most extraordinary sci-fi kind of science, which is not science fiction, it's fact, and it's been suppressed since at least World War II, if not before. And it's an entire area of scientific history which no one wants to talk about, because if they do, if that door cracks open, what everybody has been worried about, nuclear weapons, become a Sunday school picnic, a walk in the park compared to the real threats we face, because this physics, if it's in the hands of the wrong small group of people, can literally destroy a planet. Literally. Or it can save it.
You know, I do 99% of all my communication with my fellow humans, or whatever we might actually be, by listening to them through a speaker. And I'll tell you, I'm listening to you, and I'm convinced that you are convinced. And it inclines me to be convinced while keeping an open mind. But it's never what it appears, is it?
What we need to do, John, some night, obviously when you have the time, is do a show on 9/11 and take Dr. Woods' data, maybe even get her on the show, get Joseph Farrell on the show, get some of the people that I was at this seminar in Amsterdam a couple of years ago on the show, and discuss the actual evidence of an extraordinary science masquerading with all the cover stories like nanothermite, and, there's even a guy in the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, who claims it was small tactical nukes. Every conceivable, mistrail, deliberately put out piece of misinformation. Give you an example. Have you ever looked into the properties of the dust that was left? The cancers that were caused by that dust?
Only heard about them.
The fact that that dust is sitting in certain archives and you can't get near it anymore?
Didn't know that.
Do scientific studies on the dust? Why not? Because the dust is the last. What did they do with all the debris? This was a crime scene of global biblical proportions, right? What did they do? They sliced up all that steel and they shipped it to China as fast as their little trucks and their, freighters could carry it. Did they not?
Yeah, they did.
They were hiding the evidence of a physics we're not supposed to know about. And the so-called Philadelphia experiment seems to be part of the secret field. All of this stuff aggregates down to the same stuff, which is it's suppressed science. It's the way the universe really works. It's what Einstein was looking for through his entire career, the so-called unified field theory. Torsion physics is the unified field, and those buildings came down in New York because somebody, and I can't tell you tonight who. So we are dealing with a suppressed science. If you want a tutorial in this, I would advise you to either get a guy named Joseph Farrell on your show as a guest, Dr. Farrell, or start reading his voluminous books. I mean, Joseph can write like a book a month, and it's got depth and it's got references and it's real science. He's an Oxford PhD. He can run rings around most of the rest of us who take years to write one book. He can write an incredible book in a month and does excellent homework. And so if you want a real tutorial in the history of torsion field physics and how the Nazis were involved and the Soviets were involved and the U.S. government was involved,